that we'll be looking at. So I'm going to say a new project. Okay. And what the software gives me, so let's just have a quick look at, I'm going to bring a layer in of Google. So it allows me to bring in aerial photographs from Google Earth, and now I can go and look at an area that I want to study, for example. So I need to go and study Pretoria. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to introduce OpenStreetMap as well. So it gives me a map to work with. Okay, so a lot of maps are made this way as well. So the study area that we're going to focus on will be in Pretoria, and it will be the proofs, which is, I'll show you now. Let's get my bearings over here. Okay, so this area over here, they call it the proof class or experimental farm as part of the university, but we're going to use this as an example of a study area. So we're going to take this area and we're going to create a study area out of this. Okay, out of this area. If I go switch this off and I go to my Google Maps, all right, so here I've got the proof class. Okay, so there's a lot of places where you can go and find information about this. So for example, if I went to OpenStreetMap, okay, and I'm going to find Pretoria over here. It'll allow me to download all this context, which I can then use in SketchUp to build a model from. Okay, so like the buildings themselves. So a lot of the buildings do get documented, not always. Sometimes some areas are not that great, but in essence, what I want to do is there's some buildings here already on the site on the Innovation Hub. So maybe this will give me enough information to download. So I'm going to zoom out a bit. Okay. So for example, if I want to download this information here and use this information, okay, I'm going to go to OpenStreetMap. I'll show you some more sources for information. So I'm going to say, this is what I want to have a look at. There's an option here where I can go and say export. And I want to say, I'm going to say, I want to export what I'm seeing in my screen currently. So I'm going to go and say export. And it makes an OSM map. So on my desktop, I'm just going to create you're going to use the software in Bali. I would suggest that you use a folder on your machine. I've got a designated folder which I use, and I call it GIS information. So here I've got my full GIS database of all the different places that I work with from time to time. But for the time being, I'm just going to put this on my desktop. I'm going to make a folder called GIS. It's important to keep this in the same location. Don't move it around, because you need to create databases if you're going to use this type of information. And I'm just going to say save that. So it's 7 meg, not that bad. Then all that you do is once you're in Qgis, you can go and drag and drop. So on my desktop, I'm just going to go and find that folder quickly. Just put it on this side. Sorry, it's got too many screens open. Shucks, that was it now. Okay, no. All right. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here. I'm going to drag and drop the OSM information into my screen. Drag and drop it. It's going to ask me, yes, I want everything. So I'm going to select everything and press OK. So what this has given me now, so you can see it's given me some of the building layouts, footprints. It's kind of giving me points of what those interests are. It's giving me the road layouts, for example. Okay, so in here I can start saying, well, I can go to the lines. So those are my roads, for example. It's giving me municipal boundaries and that. However, these do get quite polluted. You need to separate them from each other, but you can see it's giving me a vast information. Okay. So if you wanted to create a town map, for example, of an area, so let's go and see what's going on in this map, for example. I can use the pick tool, information tool, so I can select this bit of land and it can give me information about it. It'll tell me the area, The proof blast, you can see here, it's actually identified the area of the name, for example. I can select the buildings, for example. That'll tell me, okay, sometimes it'll tell me what the building is. Okay, so if I select this building, for example, okay, I see there's a part. So I'll have to use this information and break it up a bit. Okay. In a nutshell, it's given me some information. I can see I've got some street names that it's probably given me as well. So if I select this road, for example, I might have to zoom in. Okay, not that great. Sometimes you have to click on a point. Anyway, we can sort that out later. Okay, this information, it's nice. You can see it's overlaying. I can change the way it looks, for example, because I want to see this to be a bit more translucent, because I want to see through a lot more translucent. Let's maybe make this 50. Yeah, but you see, because we're using GIS information, this ties up correctly. Okay. All right. Currently, we're using Google Earth's coordinate system. This is Google Earth's coordinate system. You can go and Google, it'll tell you which one it is more or less, but when you pull in these maps, it kind of gives you the coordinate system that are associated to these already. So if I go to properties, information, it tells you what system they use to create those maps. So you can apply the same system to your project or not. Okay, however, in Pretoria, if you want to start using this information to maybe build a SketchUp model from, for example, you'll need to change the coordinate system to be meters. So in South Africa, we use, and you can see my study area falls nicely within this Hartebeest, and I know for a fact this is the system that we use for Pretoria. I'm going to press apply. Okay, which means these coordinates at the bottom here will start working correctly. But I wouldn't worry about this too much, because for the sake of this project, I'm not too worried about where the coordinates are. It just means if I want to export this information to SketchUp, that it exports it in meters. That's all that we need to be worried about in essence. Okay. All right. So I've got my study area. Okay. So the first thing I'm also going to start introducing is I'm going to show you how you would bring in. So I've got more accurate information because I've got access to a database where I can get a lot of stuff. So if I went to Tshwane, for example, and I went to cadastral information, okay, these are very large files, so they'll need to be cleaned up, for example, but it's a good place to start. Okay, I just want to know, where all the land parcels are. And it's a shapefile. I'll drag and drop it. Oops, sorry, my mistake. I want the shapefile. I'll drag and drop that. Okay. So now I've got the land parcels for the whole of Pretoria. Okay, so this is every single parcel of land in Pretoria. And you can see, let me just print my Google. I just want to make sure I'm in the right area. So you can see that this land parcel, this is all owned by the university. Okay, and it's all, so I'm going to make this my study area. Okay, so this will be my study area in essence. Sorry, let's switch this back on. So this parcel of land will be my study area. Okay, but the problem that I have is this is too much information to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start making my own shapefiles. I'm going to create this and say export, save feature as, and I want this to be an Esri shapefile. Okay, and this is the correct coordinate system. I must make sure that that's always the same thing. And now I'm going to go and find that folder to work on. So my desktop, I'm going to save it in this folder. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call this study area. Yeah, and we'll try and make them one word. Okay, that's quite important. Save. As soon as I press save, it will automatically load that in for me. It will take a bit of time. Okay, it's a lot of information. You can see it takes a bit of time because I've got the whole of Tshwane's database. Okay, So that's my study area. This one I can now remove because it's duplicated. So remove layer. Okay. I'm going to go and start editing the shape file. So once it's a shape file, it means that you can start editing it. So I'm going to pick this section. And what I'm going to do now, because I want to get rid of everything else because it's not relevant to my project, for example, I'm going to go and use this tool here and say, invert my selection. And I'm going to press delete. Yes. This will also take quite a bit of time because it's a lot of information needs to delete. Okay, great. So I've got my study area, and then all I need to do now is press save. And now I can finish my area. Okay, so I'll wait until this is done. Okay. And now I can switch my Google Earth map back on. So maybe I won't need the rest of these, and I'll show you how to get rid of that. But for now, I'm going to leave it in because it's picking up some roads and that. And all I need to do now is change the typology. I don't like the color, for example. I prefer my study areas to be more of a look. You can use, there's lots of precedents here. You can use lots of default precedents. I like to make it a reddish color, and I want this about 50%. Press apply, press OK. Okay, there we go. So I've identified my study area. I've got my Google Maps in the background, and you can see this will tie up nicely with I just changed the order. So you can see this ties up nice with OpenStreetMap, for example. Okay. And I'm using proper coordinates. The whole time I'm using real world coordinates. I can export the stuff back into I can export this information back into Google Earth, for example. Okay, so I've identified my study area. The next thing I need to do is I want to capture all these roads in here. But if I start looking at these, for example, so switch this off. This I can probably put somewhere down there. Okay, switch my map back on. Oh, sorry, wrong direction. That was go right at the top. Okay, so now I want to start using the stuff I've got from, so my study area I can switch off. I don't need the points for now. Okay, so now I can duplicate this layer now. I can say export, save feature as, and I want to save this as a shape file. So what I'm gonna extract from here first is the buildings, the actual buildings. And you can make duplicates of these. You've always got it in the file, so don't worry about that. So you're going to call this buildings. I'm going to press OK. Just make sure it's going to put it in that correct folder. No, it wasn't to GIS. I'm going to say save. OK. It will duplicate the layer. You can take this out and drop it into your map over here somewhere. It doesn't matter. It's a shape file now, so that doesn't really. And my study area I can drop beneath. Okay. So now that it's a shape file, I can go and edit it. So this layer now, I can go and say edit. Now I can get rid of these areas, for example. You could have used that other area to study area, for example, but I just want my buildings. And you can see once I get rid of the large, I don't need all this information here. I don't need, this is too much information. Delete that. Delete that. I'll switch my study area on in the background so I know what I'm dealing with. So I don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want that. I might leave those buildings in play. I don't need that. I don't need that. I don't need that. So that's that dam. There's a dam there, for example. That. Don't need that. That. Don't need that. That. I don't need any of that information. Okay. So there's some buildings here. There's some buildings over here. Okay. So that's great. So I've got my Google Maps, and you can see it's picked up some of these. Once again, I can switch this on and off. Okay, so it's picked up, hasn't picked up all the buildings. It's picked up some of the areas. It's picked up a stadium, which is probably quite handy to know. It's picked up some water over here. Okay, it's missing some buildings there. This, yeah, and it's picked up like some sort of special field there. Here it's picked buildings, but not all, but it's quite easy to go and add these buildings in to digitize them, okay? So I've got some nice context going on now. You can play with how they look. So for example, if I wanted to start adding to these buildings now, because I'm still editing, I can go and say, add polygon feature. So now I can go and digitize this building because I've got a nice aerial photograph to work with. And to end the command, you double click and you just press enter. Sorry, let me do that again. I pressed the wrong button. So here I can go and trace these buildings. Left click. When you left click, you have to fill in. So you can just give this a building tag 1. I'm just going to call this 1, for example. There, create another building. You can put in building 1, 2, or 3. So here I can see these more buildings. So here you can go and digitize and make a map. Okay, so you can go and trace all of these buildings. You've got an aerial photograph to work with, and it's perfectly flat. So this building, for example, I can go and add, I can digitize. But the whole time, I'll explain this in a minute, this is actually making a file that I can send, I can export to SketchUp that I can use. I can use this in SketchUp to generate a model from, okay? So here you can see I can keep adding stuff. I can add all these other buildings in this context if I want to. But that's enough for now. The next one I'm going to focus on is the roads. I've got some basic buildings. I've got my study area, for example. Okay. So let me just go neaten up my study area, for example. So finish editing. Just make sure that you save your edits and finish editing. So in the study area, for example, I want to remove this object so I can I want to delete parts. I want to delete this part here. I want to delete this part here, that part there, and that part there. This is the only part I want to form part of. You can make new parts and add parts and duplicate parts, but that's something I'll cover a bit later. That's all I need to make sure was correct. So save, finish editing. All right, so I'll fix that up. So this is my study area. The last thing I need to do, so I've established my study area. I've established some context. The last thing I want to add in is just the roads. Okay, so I'm going to go back here, map lines. So those are my roads. So I'm going to say export. So here I'm going to go and say export, save feature as. Again, I'm going to go back to that folder, desktop, GIS, roads. It'll duplicate the layer. I'm going to pull it out. I don't want it to form part of that. So here I'll put it over there, more or less. Okay, so now I'm going to switch this off. Now I need to just clean up my roads. Okay, so I might leave this OpenStreetMap on. Okay, now I'm going to go and select my roads again. So I'm going to select this feature for my roads. I'm going to say edit. And I'm going to delete a lot of the contextual roads. So I don't want, or some of it I might need. Let's see what I can get rid of easily. I might leave quite a bit here. That stuff here. I don't need all of that. And you can see it's picked up all those little paths. There's a way that you can split these later, and I'll explain that how you can do it later. But for now, I just want to get rid of some of this stuff over here. This stuff I don't need. I don't need any of this. I don't need any of, no, that I'm going to leave, because I'll explain what it does for your map. So here you can get rid of all these roads, for example. But you can go and fine tune these paths. This, for example, that's a river. That's quite handy. You might export that out as a river, for example. You can see this is a stream that runs through to this pool here. So here that picks up the stream. But here you can see the parking. I've got the road network. Okay, I'm happy with this for now. I like what I've got here. This is some sort of boundary. I might leave that in. I can use this information again and again and again. I'm happy with that. So now finish editing, and okay, so I'm going to switch my OpenStreetMap off. So now, why is this handy to have the roads, for example? Let's go to my roads. I'm going to go to properties. So what's nice about this is you're going to have some symbols here that will start looking like roads, for example. So just see, sometimes they do have some pretty cool symbols, symbology. I'm looking for topo road. So let's say, let's apply that symbology, apply, press OK. So what it does is, as you zoom out, it'll start making this look like a map. So it'll generate like a road, where these roads go, for example. And depending on your scale that you work at, you can put this on a sheet. If you export this at a certain scale, it'll start looking like the roads from a distance. Okay. There is a way that you can switch off those ends. So maybe just have a look at that quickly. Properties. Okay, but there's a way you can generate the symbology. You can go and say edit. You can edit the symbology, for example. I just want a basic. And I think there's a way that you can change the way the ends look, for example. Okay, I haven't really played around with this that much, so I'm not too familiar with how the ends work. But I know that for a fact you can make sure that the ends are open, for example. So maybe for the roads, go with a more of a solid line, for example. So we could use solid black line. So maybe we do that. So let's say for this is where you do it. Joint cap. Okay, so I want this to cap flat or no cap. I think you can switch the cap off. Oh, I'm not too sure about that anyway. Let's say flat. I'll just leave it round. Okay, press apply. Anyway. Okay, but in essence, what's nice is, for example, this would have been a stream, so you can use a different symbology for the stream. Okay, so that could be blue, for example. Okay, so in a nutshell, I've established my study area, and now you've got something to start working off. You've got some basic roads, so you can start designing some new road networks to tie in. All you can do is you can generate a new feature in here to generate a new. Okay, but for now, I think that's enough. I've established my study area. I've brought in some context. I've got some roads. I've got some basic buildings. I can keep adding context to the buildings, for example. So what I could do is I could split this up again. I can export this feature as a new feature and distinguish between sports grounds and buildings themselves. Because if I remember correctly, on the Google Earth photo, you can start picking up what are sports grounds, for example. This is all a parking area. So here we can go and add a lot more information. But what's neat is you're tracing from an aerial photograph and you're tracing it very accurately. So you can use this information now in SketchUp to build the roads, to kind of build the context, the buildings, for example. Okay, so this is how they use GIS. I'll show you an example of where they use this information. So you imagine if you had to create a whole model of a city, for example, how long this would take. I'm going to show you an example of something that I've generated. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you clip a shapefile to the right size. So this will be at the end of the video that I've sent now. So how do we do this? All right, so I've got a database that I've got access to already. So I'm going to go and find that. And I'm just going to grab a shapefile, and you'll see that the shapefile is really large. So I'll need to make that a lot smaller. 20. I'm going to go to 20. Land parcels. I'm going to drag and drop this in. Okay. So I'm just going to pull in an aerial photograph behind this as well. So I'm going to pull in an aerial photograph. Okay, I put in the photograph. So I can get rid of the one, remove layer. I'm going to and put this on top. So this is just for our study area close to. So this I'm going to stop for now. I'm going to hide that. So you can see we've got a lot of data in here, which we don't necessarily need. So I'm going to find Pretoria. Better. Here's our study area over here. Okay. So this is my study area. Okay. So in essence, what I want to do is I want to create a crop of an area. So the best way to do that is to go and create a new, so you're going to go to layer, create layer, and you're going to say new shapefile layer. Okay, you can make it a temporary layer as well. So let's do that as well. So let's go to layer, create new. So here you can just say a new temporary layer, for example, new. So you're just going to call this, and this will just be a polygon, for example, and here I'm just going to call this cut. Okay, so in cut, very easily I can go and say I want to create a new shape, and I'm just going to create a rectangle. If you hold shift down, it will also draw a square, but in essence I want to cut everything around this area. So I'm going to say I want to cut everything around this area over here. Okay, so you left click to complete the command. If you want to go and edit you can then go and edit the corners to make it more square. Okay, but you can play with this. But in essence, that's all I want to do. So here I'm just going to go and say properties. Just remember this is a temporary layer. It's just going to give you something to work with, and it's not something that's permanent. You don't want to save this permanently. So I just want to make this a bit more transparent. Yeah, press apply, press OK. Okay, that's great. Okay, so I'm going to pull back in my land parcel. Okay, so in essence, what I want to do is I want to create a clip of this area. So everything outside of this boundary I don't want, in essence. Okay, so this is pretty finish. So finish your edit, save and finish your edit. Okay, then what you want to do is you want to create a clip. So you're going to go to vector, vector tools, and you go to geoprocessing and say clip. Okay, so the first, no, sorry, it's land parcel and it'll be cut. Okay, run. There we go. Close. Okay, so here I've got this. So here's my clip layer. Okay, so that was correct. Here's my clip layer, and you're good to go. Okay, so you don't need the full, so it means that you can get rid of this layer. So just say remove layer. And now it's just remember this is a temporary layer, so you'll need to save this to, so here you'll need to say make permanent. So you can make permanent, or you just say export. So make permanent, it's going to ask you where to save it. So you're going to say what format it needs to be, is shape file. That's the file, that's the correct code, for example. So here you can just add this to where you want to save all your information, for example. So I'm going to say this is issue shapefile, coding. Okay, so I'll just put this on my desktop as GIS data, desktop GIS. And I'm going to call this study area, or just say land parcels, land PAR, doesn't really matter. Okay, press OK. Okay, that file won't be included, so you need to remove this layer, and then you'll need to go and find that layer on your desktop. Okay. Okay, there's your land parcel layer now. Okay, so that works well. And what I tend to do is I like to build a database. So it's important to okay, and what I like to do is I like to save these into my database. Okay, I hope this helped.